Hi, everybody, and welcome into the SunDevilSource Postgame Show. I'm Ethan Tuttle, joined alongside Chris Cartman. We're at Desert Financial Arena, following up on Arizona State's 77-69 loss to the USC Trojans. Arizona State drops to 15-5 overall. They're 6-3 in conference play. Chris, let's go ahead and dive right into this one. Kind of just two different stories. UCLA game really close. USC not quite the same from a defensive standpoint. What were some of just the limiting factors in the defensive effort out of the gate against the Trojans?
Look, I just think when you have a team that hasn't experienced a lot of the things that ASU's going through this year, and you have a bunch of new players that you're relying on, some of whom come from other programs that didn't have the same sort of environment, and you play a game like UCLA, and it's so high-strung intensity-wise, and you invest in that so heavily, that sometimes it's hard to really understand what you need to have to do to get back up and summon the same sort of intensity for a performance against another very quality opponent like USC is. It's a tournament team quite often in recent history, and they have as much talent, if not maybe more talent than ASU, quite frankly. And the reality is ASU just did not have that tonight. They did not come out from the opening tip-off and have the type of reliable defensive intensity that they've shown throughout the season. This is a top 10 two-point percentage defense in the country throughout the year. That is an elite standing, and USC was able to get the ball to the interior, a lot of quality shots, second chance opportunities in abundance. Did a really good job from shooting from the perimeter. Boogie Ellis, Drew Peterson had great performances. Bobby Hurley, I think, was probably a little bit late taken in the initial timeout, and then wasn't able to figure out anything that was able to get his team back into a competitive gear that would allow them to make this a game.
Yeah, you talk about the reliability of the defense. Just some pretty clean defensive ball throughout this season, but tonight a lot of fouls coming just throughout the entirety of the game. USC was 12 for 12 from the charity stripe after the first half, so lots of fouls tonight. What made that so difficult for Bobby Hurley with the lineups, and how did that affect things over the course of the game?
Well, look, so Devin Cambridge had a frustration foul after a missed lob. Then he got a second foul with 14 minutes left in the half. He didn't play the rest of the way. Duke Brennan's a guy who's provided a ton of energy. He came in, he had an offensive rebound put back, but then he got his second foul. Hurley was so unhappy with what he was seeing from his starters for large stretches of that initial phase of the first half that he made substitutions en masse, and they had a very nice eight-point run, I think it was, where they got bench points from pretty much all of their second-string guys coming in. But the problem was that they weren't able to sustain that in any kind of a way. It was like Luther Muhammad, his only basket came in that period. Duke Brennan, the only basket he had in that period. Alonzo Gaffney, the only basket that he had came in that period. And then these other guys are off the floor for a huge stretch. And then at the beginning of the second half, of course, we saw that USC had a 7-0 run, very similar to the 8-0 run that UCLA had just a couple nights ago. So that put them in a very difficult situation. Really, in this game, only Warren Washington, who matched a career high with 21 points, had like 3 putbacks, and he had a very sort of energetic effort. And then Desmond Cambridge put 17 points or something like that, but it was in a 16-shot performance, and he missed like 8 threes on the night, so not good. And there was nobody else really in support of that from an offensive standpoint for ASU. And Hurley, you can make a case that maybe Austin Nunez should have been out there more, but I think he also had 2 fouls in the first half, which a little bit of a limiting factor. And all of it together, I just think that there were so many challenges that ASU was facing that Hurley was kind of dealing with that they weren't able to kind of put something together to address all of them in the collective.
In the USC team, the Trojans roll out with the zone defense. What kind of problems did that cause for the Sun Devils as well?
Throughout the season, one of the tendencies that we've seen from ASU is it's taken a few minutes for them to actually figure out what they need to be doing against some of these zones, which is somewhat perplexing because they know going in what the teams run, schematically on the defensive side. Now, this 1-3-1 There's opportunities that you have to be able to get the ball to that sweet spot area that they call the free throw line extended. And then even more so, you have to have baseline runners to get the ball into the short corner, diagonal passes to get the ball near the baseline. And they weren't able to get that sort of resolved in the first few minutes, and then they had a couple little spurts here and there. They did miss some baskets that I thought were kind of chippies around the rim that were opportunistic. But when you have such bad defensive play, atypically from what we normally see from ASU so far this season, they would have had to have a much better offensive performance against the zone than they did tonight.
So after tonight's loss, once again 6-3 in conference play. Now they're in a three-way tie for third place in the conference. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but 57th on Ken Palm as well on the net. So what does this do as a resume standpoint moving forward, not only in Pac-12 play, but in NCAA tournament play as well?
Listen, I caution some ASU fans who reached out on Twitter or on our message board talking about, oh, ASU's definitely an NCAA tournament now. And I'm like, hey, have you been watching ASU basketball for like several years now? This moves them right back into this group that they had separated from prior to losing to UCLA and USC at home. You cannot get swept at home. That is the worst thing that could happen against, no matter who it's against, but quality competition, of course, better than worse competition. Nevertheless, ASU is now 7th in the conference in Ken Palm. We're going to see when the NCAA net comes out tomorrow, but I'm sure they're going to drop roughly 8, 10, maybe 12 spots. And a lot of the sort of prognosticators were skeptical about ASU. Even before that, the wins that they had that kind of put them in a perch where they were 6-1 in the Pac-12, and this allows those people to go back and say, see, we told you, when they play against the highest caliber opponents, they're not up for that task, even in their own building. And so you drop down to 6-3. Keep in mind, ASU's got to finish the regular season playing at USC, at UCLA, at Arizona. All those are really difficult. They're going to have to go on a run now where they probably need at least a split at Washington State. They got to come home and they got to beat Oregon and Oregon State, maybe win 3 of their next 4, just to get them back into the position where they were previously, to where they're sort of somewhat comfortably considered to be a tournament team. And that's not going to be an easy task. They have a tremendous amount of work ahead of them in the final 11 games of the regular season.
All right, 77-69, the final here from Desert Financial Arena. He's Chris Cartman. I'm Ethan Tuttle. Thanks so much for joining us once again for the SunDevilSource Postgame Show. We'll see you next time.